about tonight is like the question that I had, the way that I answered that question through self-publishing, and then the process. That's what a lot of people are really interested in. How did I actually write it? How long did it take? What did I do? Things like that. We're going to talk logistics a little bit, and I'll get you started on logistics, and maybe we'll even log into my KDP account so you can see what the dashboard looks like. And when we get there, I'll talk about that. We'll talk results. I'm going to tell you like how many copies I've sold, royalties that I've earned off the books, and even the legal fees that I've been able to pull in directly because of the books. And then you guys can ask questions anytime you want. There was a point probably about 10 years ago where I thought, I want to write a book. I wanted to write a business book, a book that was related to my law practice, and actually was on the beach. I have a brother-in-law who is a physical therapist, and he's also a big golfer. And we were on the beach one night just talking, sitting down by the shoreline there. He was like, well, if you wrote a book, what would you write a book about? And I said, well, I think I would write a book about starting your own business, like all the legal aspects of starting your own business. So we both left the beach with kind of a pinky promise that we would write our books. Now, I had this idea, I wanted to write a book, and I wanted it to be about my law practice, to help my law practice. So this was my question: can I write a book to market my business, to market my law practice? Because that's what I was really after. And you can figure out your own objectives. We'll talk a little bit about that. And again, my initial idea was I would write a book about like how to start a small business, because I thought that that's what I did. I thought I spent like the majority of my law practice starting small businesses for people. I was wrong. My answers were to write this one first. Here's the deal. Everything you wish a lawyer would tell you about buying a small business. And we decided to write that book first because we did some research. What we did was I had a son who was, it was the summer after he graduated from high school. He was working for me, just doing administrative kind of secretarial assistant kind of stuff. And I just came in one day and I'm like, you know what? I didn't really think about this. And the research wasn't necessarily to decide what topic to write the book on. The research really was more marketing research. Like I was like, I want to know, we had been in business for about 10 years. And I was like, I want to know where I'm making my money. Like what projects are bringing in the biggest fees? And are those also projects that I like to work on? So I had Joseph take 10 years worth of files, and we set up a spreadsheet with information that I thought I would want to know. And he just started to go through every file and to just fill in the spreadsheet. Like just things like, industry that the client was in, what the project was about, and then eventually what the legal fee was for the project. We didn't even get to the end of that exercise. He got about halfway through it, and the pattern became really evident. And part of the pattern was we've been marketing ourselves wrong the whole time we've been in practice. We're not startup business attorneys. We do it, but it's not the primary thing we do. The primary thing we do is we help people buy and sell small businesses. And this became really evident. And what also became evident is that helping people start a small business, I might make a legal fee of somewhere between $500 and $1,000 on that project. But helping people buy and sell a small business would get me a legal fee of about $10,000. And I like working on that. And so we were kind of like, well, we should get more of this work instead of more of that work, right? That makes sense. So then I went on to Amazon and I did some research to find out what books were out there about buying and selling small businesses. There are a number of books, but there are almost no books written by lawyers. All the books are written by like professors at the Harvard Business School, consultants, brokers, people like that. And they're all written from the business perspective. There wasn't a book out there that said, hey, when you buy and sell a small business, you're going to engage a lawyer and this is what's going to happen. This is what the process is going to look like. And even more than that, there was no book out there that really explained like the contracts that you were going to have to look at and what they meant and what they said and things like that. So we wrote that book. We decided to write that book. And initially, we wrote the book simply as a reference to give either potential clients or new clients who were coming in to buy, to hire me to buy and sell a business as just a reference, just to say, hey man, you're gonna have a lot of questions during this project. The buying and selling a small business, that process usually takes about 3 to 6 months with one of my clients. So I'm like, you're gonna get up in the middle of the night, you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, what does this mean? Or what about this? Just look in the book, look in the table of contents, see if there's something in there that helps you. And I had some clients who said, yeah, that was super helpful. And so that was just a unique aspect. That's what we wanted it for. That's really what we planned for. The other thing that I love about having a book is that if I'm at a networking event, introducing myself as a business attorney is like the driest, boringest thing that can happen, right? But now when I'm at a networking event and they ask me what I do, I say, well, I'm an author and a business attorney. The conversation immediately goes to, well, what have you written? And I say, well, I've written this book about how to buy and sell small businesses, and I've written another book about how to start a freelancing business. The first book was great, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the first book. Here's the deal. The second book, Before You Leap, is really more of there wasn't really any research like I did for the other book. I was just like, this book has been sitting in my head for a long time, and I just want to get it out there. And so we did that. Before You Leap, it hasn't had the same kind of results that the Here's the Deal book has had. So let's talk about process. This is my process. Your process may be different, but it's going to be pretty much the same kind of steps. Like first, you need to figure out why you're writing the book and who you're writing it for. For me, the first book I wrote, I was writing it because I wanted to write a book. I wanted to market my law practice. And the audience that I had in mind were those people who were buying and selling small businesses because I wanted to bring more of them in as my clients. Second book, my objective was frankly more of just like, I have this book in my head and I want to get it out there. Simply, it's really a compilation of a lot of questions that people frequently ask me. I mean, this book is formatted in a way that every chapter has a topic, but every chapter is organized based on questions that people typically ask me about that topic. Like, do I need a limited liability company? If I do, why? What's the difference between a limited liability company and an S corporation? Just things like that. How do I set up an LLC? What kind of documents are required to set up an LLC? What should it say in them? Just things like that. So the objective of the second book was really more, like I said, just to kind of create a place where I put all that information, and the audience was not as well defined as the audience for the first book. Initially, the second book even had a different name. I mean, it was called it's always been called Before You Leap, but it had a different tagline. It was called something like How to Set Up a Gig Economy Business. To me, the phrase gig economy business meant a freelancing business, a business where you go out and you get gigs, you get projects, and a lot of IT people, graphic design, software developers, website developers, those people are all, to me, gig economy businesses. But what we quickly realized was we were getting a lot of feedback about, like, why would you write about how to be an Uber driver? They were thinking that it was more of somebody like if you were a DoorDash person, what I would call a gig economy worker. I think we let it stay out there for like a year and a half with that subtitle, and then last year we went through and switched it so it was all really designed for, what it was really for was people who were doing freelance businesses. Having an objective, figuring out kind of a target audience. I don't like these exercises, and I've read books and I've listened to podcasts and things like that where they have this whole exercise where you're supposed to fill out, your what do you call them, your avatar, your ideal reader. She's 20 years old, she's about to start her own freelance bit. No, I can't get into that, right? But I can get into the idea of, this is my objective and this is who I'm trying to write this for. Identifying and narrowing your topic, right? I think it's important to, to think about how you can make your topic as specific as possible, if that makes sense, and especially how to answer perhaps a question that people have. And as an example, on the fourth book that I'm writing right now, initially that book started out because I was on a mentoring program at my law school, and I was participating in a number of Zoom meetings with law students and young attorneys, and they were asking lots of questions, and I thought, hey, I get asked these questions a lot, so maybe I should just write a book about my career, like my story. And we spent a lot of time. I think I had a 7-page outline. I spent weeks trying to figure things out. You saw the photo of me with all the Post-it notes. Yeah. So what I had done was I had a capture system. I carry a notebook around with me, and I captured a bunch of ideas, and then we put them all on sticky notes, and I arranged them all. And I thought, okay, this is it. Created an outline from that. Wrote 4 or 5 chapters, and then was just I'm just not feeling it. It's so broad that I don't think that it's not enticing. There's not a hook there, right? You really want to read a whole book about a lawyer's career, a lawyer who's not I'm not on the Supreme Court or anything like that, right? So where's my hook? And so as I started to look at the outline a little more, I realized that about 5 or 6 chapters of the book were all about how I got business over the 30 plus years of my career. What have I done? I'm a fairly introverted person, but yet we've been able to somehow sustain ourselves by getting business. And so what does that look like? And so I took that, I expanded that topic, and I created a whole book out of that. You're looking for that hook, and one of the things to do, at least that I did, and I'm no expert at this, I'm just telling you my experience, but is that I did a lot of research on Amazon. I just typed in a lot of search terms to see what was there. And if I found a gap, then I was like, maybe I could fill this gap. If you find a book on Amazon that looks like something that maybe you're looking at doing as well, you can also, Amazon's pretty powerful. They'll tell you customers who looked at this book also looked at these 10 books. And so you can kind of see what people are looking at. Or the other thing they show you is people who bought this book typically also buy these 2 books as well. So then the writing discipline. I think this is the thing that people ask me about the most. How long did it take me to write? So I'm going to tell you my writing discipline for the 4 books that I've written. 2 of them are published, 2 of them are in draft. So for the red book, here's the deal. This one, I was trying to be as disciplined as possible. I thought, what I'll do is I'll work all day, and then I'll come home, and after everybody kind of settles down for the night, I'll write for an hour or an hour and a half. So for 4 or 5 months, I lived with that myth, that tender thought that it never happened. I would say, it didn't happen tonight, I'll do it tomorrow night. But for me, I was exhausted, right? I was tired. If a basketball game were on, I'd rather watch the basketball game. I was just too tired for that. To back up, before I even got to the first thing I did was, and this is just a picture of the first page, is I wrote an outline. That's the way I work, right? This outline that I had for the book was 7 or 8 pages long. I just used it. You can see all the checks on the outline because I used it as a checklist. As I wrote, I would just check the section off. Okay, I did that. You can see too, this is just the way I work. There are a lot of handwritten notes on there because during the process, I might have an idea and I might be like, that's a really good idea. That should go in right here. All 8 pages of that outline look like that, just handwritten notes all over it. But that outline lived with me for probably a year and a half. I used the same piece of paper. It was all raggedy and everything. I took it with me wherever I went to write and things like that. So for the first book, once I had my outline and once I went through the first 3 to 4 months of figuring out that I'm not going to write in my spare time at night, that's never going to work for me, then I decided what I'm going to do is I'm going to block off the first hour of my day in my office, and I'm going to force myself to write. I'm going to force myself not so much to write, but to ignore the pressures of my practice. I knew I'd have this laundry list of everything I had to do during the day, but I was like, I'm just going to swallow it and ignore it for that first hour. I did try and come in, I try and come in early enough so that if I wrote from like 8 a.m. to 9 a.m., I still at 9 a.m. I was ready to go with business when business opened up. But that was hard for me because when I first started practicing, a lot of times I'd start my day at 7 or 7:30 in the morning, just start working on my projects. I think from the time I created that discipline until the time we published, I think it took me about 7 to 9 months to write, and then it took another 3 months for us to publish. It was about a year process to go from writing the first words in the book for the draft to actually pushing the button on Amazon to publish it. I mean, it doesn't sound fun, does it? What I found was once I got into the habit of it, there were days when probably like after about a month or so into the process, there were days where I would get lost in the writing, and I'd write an hour and a half and realize I went 30 minutes over. Because that's another reason why I used that checklist on my outline was at first when it got to an hour, I stopped. No matter where I was, I stopped and just put it aside. But after about a month, I found that it was like I get lost and it'd be like an hour and a half, it'd be like 9:30, and I'm like, I better put this aside and get to work, So it became less tedious, but I think I was pretty religious about keeping that schedule, and it hurt. It hurt because I knew I was not making any money doing it, right? Like for every hour I do something that I can't bill is an hour of billable fees that I lose. That's the way I've been trained. That's my mindset, my psyche, and all that stuff, right? So that's hard. That's hard for me. But you may find a different time. Like you may find lunchtime. You may say, I'm gonna just take my lunch. I can't do that. I gotta go get my head out of my office for my lunch or something. But that may work for you, right? Another thing that worked is finding a different space. Instead of trying to write at my desk, maybe to write in a space where nobody can bother me, kind of thing. If you have a laptop, you can go a lot of different places and where people can't find you and they can't say, hey, we're having a problem with this, right? You hide. I mean, that's a possibility. I'm fortunate enough that when I wrote the first book, I wrote it in my office. Nobody bothered me anyway. Now, I didn't finish that discipline. I did not finish the book by sticking to that discipline. I finally got to the point where it was so tedious and I was so done with it that we just rented a cottage down at the Outer Banks. I would get up at like 8 in the morning. Everybody else got up at like noon. So I'd write for 3 or 4 hours every day. And I think it took till like Thursday afternoon that I finished. I was like, I'm done the book. But I'd work till noon, and then everybody would get up and we'd go out on the beach and we'd go do fun stuff. And so I just put it aside. I wouldn't I'd go have fun with everybody. I was not in the office. I had time. So a writing retreat, I think, is an idea, right? I mean, it's a possibility. The writing discipline on this book is completely different. For this book, I didn't even have an outline. What I did was I had this idea for this book, and I wrote this book in 6 days. So 6 days, 3 days out, 3 days back. I wrote half the book on the way out, half the book on the way back. And the way I did it was I just had my laptop with me. I knew what my topics for my chapters wanted to be. So like the first chapter is called Starting a Freelancing Business. What I would do is I would just take a Word document, I'd type the title of the chapter at the top, and then I would just brainstorm all the questions that people asked me. And I would just type all those questions down, and then I just started answering them. And that's how I got my first draft done. The book is 161 pages long. So in those 6 days, I was able to just essentially do a mind dump of questions that I'm always asked and answers that I give, and experiences that I've had that kind of help people, tell people, well, this is kind of the conventional answer, but it doesn't really work. You're going to spend money on a lawyer to do this for you, and the result isn't going to be what you want. So here's what we do instead. Here's what I do, or here's what I've seen work. That book was a lot faster, but again, it was because I put myself in a place where I could just be isolated and I could just write. All my food was provided. I had a place to sleep. I could sit in the observation car and write, which has all the glass, and I can go through the Rocky Mountains. And I didn't write through the Rocky Mountains. It's just too beautiful. So that was how we did this book. And then the fourth book was done the same way. Jenny and I went across the country on the train. The fourth book, I already had spent a lot of time putting an outline together. So when we got on the train, I think I had written a few chapters as well, like 3 or 4 chapters at home, doing the morning thing. But when we got on the train, Jenny edited, and then I kept writing more and more. So when we got home, I had essentially it's not quite done. The last chapter still needs some work, but it's hard. I had to put that one aside because we had a couple of other ideas pop up while we were on the train, and we've been pursuing those instead. But the idea, we're going on spring break in the middle of April, and I'm using that again as a writing retreat because I know people will be sleeping and things like that, and I'll write while they're doing whatever they're doing. So those are some ideas. That's my process. Everybody's got to find their own writing discipline, I think. When we talked with Charlie, this topic came up and he started asking a lot of questions, and he was like, I can never do that. I can never just sit and write. I mean, that's just not who I am. And I'm like, fine, find your own way. And one of those ways might be just to take your phone and to just start talking, right? And do a talk to text. There are certainly apps, if you want to pay a little bit of money, they're not that expensive to put on your phone or even your laptop, where you can just talk and dictate and it types it for you. And then you once you have that first draft, then you can take that and do what you need to do to it. I think some people have difficulty because they want to edit as they write. They want it to be essentially close to a final draft, and you don't want that. You just want to get all your thoughts and your ideas on paper, and then once it's all on paper, go back and edit. Like, don't edit until you're finished your first draft of the whole thing. Don't edit. I mean, you're going to be tempted to. You're going to be like, oh, I feel like this, but I mean, even if you get to a point, like I've been typing and I've been like, oh, I just had an idea for something that I was writing about 30 minutes ago. Instead of going back up to that, wherever that spot was, I just type it right in that and I just say, insert this further up, and I just start typing. To me, the writing is not the tedious part. To me, it's once I finish writing and we start doing the editing and the formatting, drives me crazy. Like I think the first book, I read it like 7 times after I wrote it, and we had other people read it, and I'll tell you about that. We got to a point where I just said to Jenny, I'm done, it's just got to go. And there are problems with it. I go back now and I read sentences and I'm like, oh, that's a terrible sentence. Or I don't think we've found any typos, have we? But there are issues with the book. It's not perfect. But I've never had a reader come back to me and say, hey, this sentence is terrible. My only other piece of writing discipline is don't try and edit as you go along. If you're an accomplished author, you have a publisher or an editor who does that for you. And unfortunately, if you're self-publishing, you have to either figure out like who else you can ask to help do that, or you got to do it yourself. That's why I think it's tedious, because I'm just like, I feel like I've kind of like spilled my whole soul onto the page, and now you're asking me to go back and shape it and edit it and things like that. I'm like, no, I'm creatively drained from writing, which was a great experience. I love that experience, but I'm done. I would rather just hand it off to somebody else and say, okay, fix it up. Let's get this out. I'm very much into breaking things down into increments. For me, that's what works really well, because otherwise it does seem very overwhelming and tedious. But if I can say to myself, okay, on my outline, I'm just going to write about this one thing today, and I'm going to check that off, then I feel like I can eat that a little easier than I got this whole idea for a book, and it's going to just, it's going to take a long time. It's going to be really tedious. I mean, frankly, that's the difference between a lot of authors and non-authors, is that the authors just push through it. Stephen King has a book called On Writing, and it's one of my favorite books about writing. And the first third or so of maybe half of the book is essentially his autobiography. He tells you how he became a writer. It is interesting, but as as some of my kids would say, he does have a bit of a potty mouth. He has red words in there, and if that bothers you, I wouldn't read it. But in the second half of the book are all his tips on how he writes, his process, things like that. His style is very succinct. He's very spare. He's very economical in the way he writes. And so it's good if you're into reading books about writing. It's always at the very top of the list of contemporary books on writing. Editing and formatting. These are things that I did some myself. Like Jennifer and I edited multiple times, but we also hired other people to edit for us. We hired, for the first book and the second book too, I found budding book editors. They wanted to be in that industry, and I was like, hey, I'll pay you X number of dollars if you'll edit my book for me. And they were like, sure, we'll do it. They were real eager on the first book. I had 2 of them do it. They did a wonderful job. When I talk about paying them, I think I paid like somewhere between $250 and $500 for them to edit the book. Formatting, we'll look at my KDP dashboard in a second here. If you're going to publish on Amazon, you have to follow their formatting guidelines. So you have front cover, spine, and back cover formatting, and you have interior formatting as well. And there are specifications. So I just went to Fiverr and I just hired somebody to do all that for me. And it cost me a couple $100. Now, I talk about the money like it's not a big deal. I know it's a big deal, but for me, it's because it's a business effort. These are all deductible business expenses for my business. So if you have a business, a side business or something, you have an LLC or something like that, you might think about running the expenses through your business so that you can use business money to do it and you can deduct it as a business expense. Editing and formatting, that took me about 3 months on probably each book. I think we took about 3 months to do that because that's the tedious thing to me. It just takes forever. If you got other people helping you, you're waiting for them to get it back, and it's hard to say to a friend, hey, I'm really anxious to get this out there. Can you please, that's, everybody's got their own schedule and their own agenda and stuff. The formatting, I just don't want to learn all that. You have to know how to use certain type of software to do the formatting, and you can hire freelancers who do it every day, all day long, and they already have the software and they know how to use the software. And so they just, I just send them, for example, a Word document of my manuscript, and within a couple days, they've formatted the whole thing. They've created the table of contents for me. They've formatted it based on Amazon specifications, and they just send me a PDF back, and I just upload that PDF to Amazon, and I'm done. The first book, I didn't use Fiverr, but I found a person who had been an employee at Amazon who did formatting and had been let go. I hired her, and she was great. Technically, the release is pretty easy. Once you've got everything, then you just push the button and it appears on Amazon. This is the thing that I never thought of when I wrote a book, is how am I going to get people to read my book? Never thought of it. Just didn't even think it would be difficult. For the first book, I contacted the business editor for the Virginian Pilot, and fortunately she was interested. I just sent her an email. She sent me an email back. She asked me a bunch of questions. I filled out her questionnaire, and without even telling me, like 3 weeks later, boom, it appeared in the Virginian Pilot in the inside business thing. And that was good. That led to something that happened. I hired some service that sent out 380 press releases. Nobody picked it up. Nobody picked up the story, so that was wasted money. We did like a grassroots, like we picked like 30 or 40 organizations and people and stuff like that, and we just sent them a cover letter with a complimentary book and said, if you want to talk to me learn more about this. But I don't think anybody really responded. In this office that we were sharing with other attorneys, when the book first came out, one of the other attorneys came in my office, he looked at it, he goes, "This is amazing." He said, "How much does this cost you?" And I said, "Oh, it's $3.20 a copy for me." He goes, "You should hand these out like business cards." And so we ordered like 100 of them. And we were like, hey. Yeah, I mean, it was a great idea. You can read and study a lot of things about promoting. Like they'll tell you should have your own author website with a sales funnel and collect email addresses. We've never really ventured into that because I'm not really trying to sell books. I'm trying to get clients with my books. And I don't have a lot to say about promotion because I'm not really good at it. And I've been good enough for things to happen with us. What I want to do is talk logistics real quickly, talk results, and then I'm going to go live onto my dashboard so you can kind of get a general idea. Kindle Direct Publishing. This is Amazon's self-publishing arm, and it's easy to find. All you type in is kdp.amazon.com. If you have an Amazon account already, you can use your Amazon login to log into KDP. You can get in, no problem. It's free. KDP is the primary way to do self-publishing. KDP offers you 3 ways to self-publish your book. You can self-publish it as a paperback, as an ebook, and as a hardback. That's a new option, I think, as of last year, is to do hardbacks. We've only done ebooks and paperbacks. Once you have a paperback, it's not hard to convert it into an ebook. But again, I've always hired somebody to do that for me. Pick $100, $150, and they just take my manuscript and format it into ebook format. There have to be links. The table of contents is all linked up so that you can jump forward and backward. The other service that Amazon offers is called ACX, and it's just at acx.com. ACX is for audiobooks. You can hire talent on ACX if you want. I did the whole thing. For the first book, I did auditions. So I had it was overwhelming. I had 500 people send me auditions. It was crazy. And I paid him about $3,400. You can pay people to do it. Some people will take a percentage of sales. Audiobooks I only did the audiobooks because I had my college roommate who's a very successful businessman in the healthcare industry just said, "Do you have an audiobook? Because if you did, I'd listen to it." And I was like, "Oh, well, maybe there's a demand." There hasn't been that much of a demand. I've sold about 1,000 audiobooks, which is okay, but you make a much smaller royalty on the audiobook. So from a cost benefit perspective, I have never broken even on the audiobook for the amount of money I spent on it. But you can also, right now, I'm having Joseph do this one. He's doing my son Joseph is doing the audio for that. And I plan to do my own reading, my own audiobook for the 4th book that I'm writing. If you're okay with technology, you don't need a lot of gear to record your own audiobook. You can get good quality just off a laptop, a free piece of software, and a $50 microphone, and maybe a pair of $50 headphones. When you publish an audiobook on ACX, Amazon owns Audible. So they automatically do 2 things. One is on your Amazon author, the book page, it shows up as an audiobook. And then if you go into Audible, you can search and find it that way as well. And it's available to buy either through Amazon or directly from Audible. Business books, I don't think make that exciting. I mean, a leadership book might be a great audiobook, right? More people might be more interested to listen to an audiobook on the subway or on their commute or something about leadership than they would about, a dry kind of lawyer book about, when you see this in the contract, this is what it means.
So you made less because the margin is less, or because you have more upfront expense,
the margin is much less. Yeah.
Margin's much less.
Yeah. What happens with an ebook, especially if we participated in Kindle Unlimited, what happens is that you get a royalty based on. So at the end of every month, they have a pool of money that they've brought in from subscriptions. And then they dole that money out based on number of pages read, but also on popularity, things like that. Like if you're like me, I'd get like $1.50.
But if you're a best-selling author, you want to be out there. So it depends on who your audience is.
What happened was when we took the ebook off as an option, more people bought the print book. So we make $5 a book on the print book. So instead of making $1 or whatever on an ebook, somebody would buy a print book instead. We've already quadrupled our profit on that. So that was kind of cool. Yeah, it worked for us. I mean, I think that, again, it's the nature, like the fourth book I'm writing, it's got a lot of stories in it. That's much more inclined, I think, for an audio book. I think I'll have more people buy audiobooks just because it'll be more interesting. We talked about Fiverr and Upwork. Those are places where you can go and find people to do some of these things. You can hire freelancers to do interior formatting, cover artwork, ebook conversions if you want. KDP they have a tool on there for designing your own exterior covers. They have like templates. They only have like maybe 8 templates that you can choose from. They look like at first I didn't want to use them because they looked like romance novel templates, because I think that's, there's a huge romance novel self-publishing industry. But what we realized was that even though they have limited options, we could go in there and change a lot of those options. So you can design your own cover if you want. The only other thing we use is Amazon advertising. We actually advertise, we pay Amazon to promote, like if you do a search, like for small business books, many times my book will be promoted, or sometimes you see it'll say sponsored or promoted in the search results. It just puts me higher up in the results. Find that is it just advertising.amazon.com? I think that's what it is. But again, you can use all these services, ACX, KDP, Amazon advertising. You just use your Amazon login and you can get into all of them. Amazon advertising is something that we have debated back and forth because it's expensive. We pay a lot every month. We pay like $400 or $500 every month to do Amazon advertising, and we probably almost break even on royalties, make a little bit more. But from my perspective, I look at it as I'm advertising my business. So my business is paying for the advertising, and I'm okay with that. It's also very DIY, so you have to come up with all your own search terms and things like that. And so we've tested different search terms, and one of the things I've done is gone on Amazon and occasionally, and I look at books that sell with my book by other authors, and I see what terms they're using, what search terms and things like that. Then I go in and change my words and stuff. Let's talk results. Once you have it and you publish it, you want to register your copyright with the U.S. Copyright Office. It's easy to do, and it can be done online. All right, here are some results. Exposure. This is really a big part of what I was looking for. So I've been interviewed on 12 podcasts, all of them about buying and selling small businesses, like merger and acquisition podcasts, and that's been really good. That's been really good exposure. But partly because the podcast hosts will allow me, they video record all the podcasts. So if you go to my YouTube channel, you can watch. They've allowed me to pull that into my YouTube channel. You can watch my interview. The University of Illinois contacted me about a year after I published the first book and said, hey, we have this class in our MBA program, and can we use your book in the class? And I was like, absolutely. And they said, and would you mind coming and doing a guest lecture for us every semester? So we've been like, yeah, that's great. The reason why that's been really good for us is because every winter semester, a whole bunch of people buy my book. And not only do they buy my book, but they buy 2 other books. So when you do a search in Amazon, my book, it comes up, hey, frequently bought together, this bundle of books. But you can see the graph of historical sales is really almost non-existent until a year after, and then it just goes up. And it just goes like this ever since then. So that's been good. The second university we haven't gone to yet, we just got an invitation on Friday. I'll be speaking at the Columbia Business School in their MBA program. But a big reason why is because there's not another book really like this. We connected a couple of months ago on LinkedIn, and I read your book and I like it, and I was wondering, would you come up and give the lecture? And I'm like, absolutely. So I've sold over 5,000 books on Amazon. That's never been our primary focus, to sell books, but it's happened, and that's been great. So if you want to know, royalties are a little over $30,000. Now this is over 6 years, so it's not a ton, but it's $30,000. I'm like, hey, I'll take that. Here's the big number. New business, in the last 5 years, over $130,000 in legal fees from new business. We have achieved the objective. That's the thing that makes me feel really good. And that business comes now, I think I have at least 4 transactions in my office right now where people just bought my book on Amazon, read it, and then they call me up and they say, read your book, really liked it. Are you available? Can we hire you to do our transaction? I'm like, absolutely. Probably in the last 2 years, we've probably done 10 transactions just for people who bought the book on Amazon, read it. Other business has come locally. One of the first things that happened was that article that was in Inside Business. Another attorney who I've never met in town read the article, ordered my book off of Amazon. He had a client that he did a certain very niche type of work for. This client also used one of the biggest law firms in the town to do all his M&A, his merger and acquisition work. Had 5 transactions currently open with the firm. The firm said, we have a conflict of interest. We can't represent you anymore. So he went to see this other lawyer and said, I need somebody to represent me in these transactions. And he goes, look, I just read this book. It was on his desk. I just read this book, and this guy's in town. You should go see him. So he came to see me, and I did his transactions. And I also then ended up, because of a referral he made, representing the buyers group for the Norfolk Admirals. So I helped buy the Norfolk Admirals for the buyers group. Yeah. And this is, these are the kind of things that have happened with the book. It's been amazing. I could have never predicted that, right? Like I didn't plan that, but those are the kind of things that have happened for us. So those are the results. I've been thrilled. I didn't think this book did much, but of that $130,000 in legal fees, and it's more than that actually, because I just closed the deal. When I published this book, I announced it on LinkedIn. And when I was at a big firm, I was in charge of all the summer interns. And this attorney had been a summer intern with us 15 years ago, had opened a law practice in the Washington, D.C. area, representing political candidates, all these things. And he called me up and he said, I had no idea. I bought your book, I read it. I had no idea that you could help with this kind of stuff. Can I refer you work? So from that one guy, dollars in legal fees from projects that he referred to us just based on this book. In 32 years I've been practicing, this is by far the best thing I've ever done. I mean, by far. And so I'm an evangelist for self-publishing your own book. You can do it. You have to DIY a fair amount of stuff if you're going to do that, or you hire somebody to do it. But we've done all this ourselves. We've DIY'd everything, the profile down here, the book summary. We did all that, and we've changed it. You can change it anytime you want for free. You can just go into your Amazon author account and just change it. If you get 25 reviews on your first day, on your launch date, then you get pushed to the top of the page, essentially. You get pushed high up. He sent manuscripts out to 25 or 30 of his good friends and had them read the book before he launched it and had them commit to coming on the first day and writing a review. So he had 30 some reviews the first day. I'm gonna show you KDP. I'll just show you a couple things about KDP. Once you log in, so I'm logged in just with my Amazon account, it'll look just like this for you. As you scroll down, they have this thing called Bookshelf. It's print on demand. I don't advance any money out of my pocket to Amazon for books. So if you go on Amazon and you order one of my books, Amazon takes care of everything. They print it, they ship it, but as a result, they keep about 65%. So they keep about 2/3 of the, which I'm okay with because I don't want to touch anything. If I click on this continue setup, you can get a general idea, but it's essentially a wizard that it'll walk you through. Pick your language, your book title, your subtitle, edition number, the author name. I don't have any contributors. I haven't put a description in yet. This is where I can choose my initial keywords for search options, categories that I want my book to be in, and you can change that. You can always go back and change that. Once I hit save and continue, on the next pages, that's where I get to upload my content. So I get to upload the PDF of my interior, and that's where you upload your cover, or you design your cover. And then the last step is to price it. You just pick a price. I just picked a price based on what my competitors, they review it all to make sure it's all formatted properly. When you go to KDP, this is where all your reports are. So it shows me already this month I've sold 33 books. That's my estimated royalty for the month. This is my last 30 days worth of sales. Here's historical book sales by month for the last 7 years. All right, I think I'm done. That's a lot. That's like a fire hose of stuff. Whatever questions you have, and not even tonight, I mean, anytime you want to call me, text me, email me, whatever, even if you just are like, I'm so sick of this, I need a pep talk, I'm always happy. Part of what happens is on Amazon, you can pick the size of your book. If you use color in your interior, if you use photographs, well, color photographs, then you get a smaller royalty because the margin goes down because the cost of the book goes up. So 32,000 words are 93 8.5 by 11 pages. You make all these like decisions that you're like, I never even thought about, like what font are you going to use? What size? What point size are you going to use? What spacing are you going to use? Are you going to indent at the beginning? Are you going to not indent? Are you going to do full justification? Are you going to all these little things? I'm like, what? There are a number of books that are published by professional publishers that if you look at the information page in the book, like the copyright page, it'll tell you what the font is. And so, not every book. I finished a novel the other night and I was like, wow, I love the font in this book. And sure enough, the author said, this book is published in this font, this typeface, point and all this stuff. And I'm like, that's what I'm using for my next book. If you're going to hire somebody to format your book, just ask them. Just ask them what they typically do. A lot of people use Georgia font. A lot of people use Garamond. Not once you write, use the book as a way to establish a way for speaking. I know we talked a lot about like all the logistics, but you don't even have to worry about that until you have something, right? And if you get to that point, you're like, I can't remember what to do, just contact us again. I mean, we would absolutely love to. I'll sit by your side as you log into KDP, and we'll set it. And when you get to a question and you're like, well, it says I have to have an ISBN number. I'm like, I got you. I can tell you where to go to get a free ISBN number. It's easy stuff. In a former part of my career, I have represented people in the creative industries. Like I've done publishing deals for people. They're really difficult to get. The upside of having your own publisher is, of course, they're going to do all the editing, the formatting, and the promotions. So they'll get you all the speaking gigs and all that kind of stuff. They'll promote your book to all the industry associations and things like that. That's the upside. The downside is you lose a lot of control. You don't make that much money because they're going to eat up a lot of the revenue on the book. If somebody approached me and said, hey, your book's doing really well.
$1 million deal, you could say.
Right, and I could say, it's yours. That's one of the beauties of self-publishing is you own all the rights. And so if somebody wants to come buy them or license them for you, sure, you always have that option. Eventually, writing is what's going to sell the book. I think the second book is much better written than the first book, just because I had been through the process. The books we're writing now, I'm actually using, have you heard of Grammarly? So I just paid for, I think it cost me $120 or $150 for a annual subscription, and I'm just running my book. That's my first edit, is I'm just running it through Grammarly and seeing what it suggests. I'm not accepting everything it's telling me because for some reason a lot of people don't use commas anymore. There's got to be ways to use AI to help, but I would be worried about plagiarism and copyright infringement.